My name is Larry Edwards. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, many years ago. Actually, 73 years ago, which is many. I moved to Louisville, Mississippi, which was a small town in northern Mississippi. There was no such thing as art in the schools, no such thing as art in the town. And it's always amazed a number of people how I could have come out of that kind of environment with no real contact with art, with one exception, and become involved with it as a serious artist. That one exception was that you may remember in your studies or your history, back in the Depression, the WPA project kept a lot of artists alive by giving them contracts to do a variety of art type things. And one of the things that many of them did was to paint murals in federal buildings, post offices, and this kind of thing. And in this little town, with no art except a kid named Art who lived 2 blocks over, in this little town, there was an original work of art in the post office. And we got our mail was not delivered to our house. We lived on the edge of town. We had a post office box. I would volunteer every day to go get the mail because I had a chance to look at that original work of art. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I thought it was a fresco on the wall. I'd vaguely heard of the term fresco. And so I grew up with that, other than the comics being the only real contact I ever had with art, except some strange interest in it. Years later, I went back to that little town, and I thought, I'm going to go to the post office and see if that work of art is up. Well, I went back, and it was a sad situation. The work was still there, but they had just finished repainting the walls, one of these institutional kind of colors, green, I think it was. They hadn't even covered it with a drop cloth, and there were speckles of green paint over the painting. But the painting was so bad, I didn't know at the time I saw it. I thought it was great. And since then, I'd seen a lot of real art, been involved in it. This was one of the worst pieces of bad WPA regionalism art that I have ever seen in my life. It was done by a Mississippi artist. I won't mention his name in this, but it was a real disappointment, and yet that had a tremendous influence on me in terms of art. Oh, love the comics, and I love looking at them because they were visual. You know, not because I was overly interested. I was interested in the stories and the things, but I became very fond of all the different styles that all of these various artists drew in, and there was a wide range, you know, from something about like Milton Caniff and Terry and the Pirates, which is a fairly realistic thing, or Hal Foster's Prince Valiant. Both those were fairly realistic looking things, and then you get into some things like Snuffy Smith, which was a pretty crude kind of cartoon thing, and Little Orphan Annie with the blank eyes and all, you know. But it was the only live thing that was there in a sense, and I got to see new ones every day, you know, because we took a couple of papers. But the comics always fascinated me, and I've discovered since those years that there are a lot of other artists that felt like they started off wanting to be a cartoonist. That's what I wanted to be, was a cartoonist. And a lot of artists were influenced by and fascinated by the comics. As I went through school, I did a lot of drawing when I should have been probably listening or something there. And, you know, did some stuff for the yearbook. You know, this is a story that could be told about almost any kid coming along that didn't have access, you know, to museums or art teachers or something. They simply drew because it was there and they wanted to do it. And all kids, you know, start out liking to draw. And then they lose it for a variety of despicable reasons there. But those that are really, truly interested, they just keep on drawing, and suddenly one day they're doing it seriously, you know, or studying, majoring in art, or doing art, or whatever. I wanted to go to Mexico. There was a school, I can't remember now what it was. Now, it was fairly well known back in those days. We're talking back in the 40s now, late 40s. But I wanted to go to Mexico and go to school, and my folks were real nervous about that. And they said, well, look, if you'll just go to this junior college, it's not very far from where you're for a year, then we'll help pay your way through this school in Mexico. So I went down there for a year and spent a lot of time probably carousing around or whatever, but there was an art teacher there. I would never recommend him to anybody, but at least he was a real art teacher, you know. So I took some art courses, and then I decided, well, I don't want to go to Mexico, but I want to go somewhere and study art. And a high school Latin teacher I had said, well, I have a sister that lives in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and they have a great art department at the University of Southern Mississippi. At that time, it was Mississippi Southern. And so based on nothing more than that, I said, I'll go down there. And so I did. I went down there and stayed for 3 years. Had a strange thing that happened to my name down there. I had grown up in Louisville using my middle name. My full name is Lawrence Fielding Edwards. And Fielding was what all these people call me. And I always thought, like, that's a weird name. There's nobody here. Nobody in the state of Mississippi is named Fielding. Actually, later on there was a governor named Fielding Wright. But I always thought, well, I wish I had another name. I wish I had a name like other people have instead of this weird name. Well, when I went down there, the head of the art department had the transfers and freshmen. We went to a meeting and he was checking this roll to see who all had gotten here and so on, and sort of giving people a chance to say, I'm so-and-so. And so he was going down this Mitty Sue and Mary Jane and Fred and so on like that. And he called out, and he was calling all the first names to make everybody feel at ease. And so he called out the name Larry and nobody answered. And he called out Larry again and nobody answered. And suddenly it dawned on me, that's me he's talking about. He's taking my name Lawrence, the first name, and you know, the shortened version of it is Larry. I said, here. He said, they do call you Larry, don't they? And I said, they've always called me Larry. And so I became down there Larry Edwards. I began to paint these kind of abstract expression things. From what little I'd known, I'd never seen an original. I'd only seen a few things reproduced in some art magazines. And it really just blew the minds of this painting teacher I had. He just absolutely couldn't understand what was going on. And he was sort of bad about doing some what I think of as no-nos as a teacher. I remember one time he came up and I was painting a kind of semi-abstract landscape. And he said, let me show you how to do this. He took the brush right out of my hand and skirted around some paint and started doing on the thing. Well, it really made me mad, really made me mad. So I said, you son of a bitch. And now here's a kid that weighs 125 pounds, an undergraduate student, the guy that teaches an ex-Marine and big and tough and all. And I said, if you ever touch a painting of mine again, I'll kill you. It just blew me away. I'd done something insane. I thought I'd never graduate from this place, and it hurt his feelings, you know. Well, he never touched another painting of mine, hopefully nobody else's. But as I got deeper and deeper into this abstract expressionism, they just gave up finally. They said, we don't know what you're doing. We don't know what this is all about. We'll just leave you alone, let you do what you want to. So I did. But it was real interesting. But it was exciting. God, when I went off to college like that and ran into other serious students about art and learning about all kind of new things and all, you know, it was just fabulous, just unbelievable. I remember the first time I saw a piece of original New York City art abstract expressionist. It was in a little town of Laurel, Mississippi, which was just not very many miles away from Hattiesburg. And they had a little circulating show that some museum up in Brooklyn or somewhere was sending around the country. And there was a painting by Gorky. He was one of the great members of the abstract expressionists. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. The paint was piled up, it was that thick. And the shapes were these marvelous things and great lines going through it. And I thought, my God, this is what it's all about here. This is it. And I can still see that piece in my mind to this day. It was such a fabulous kind of thing. Probably after Guston, the person that's been most influential on me is Hieronymus Bosch. I was given a talk up in Dayton, Ohio at a college one night, and after it was over, I asked for any questions. One old guy raised his hand and says, you're the American Bosch. I like Bosch a lot. I like Bonnard. I like Vuillard. I like Munch. I like an American artist named Milton Avery, which is not like any of these other people. I like a number of artists. I like Rothko. I named my son Mark from Art Rothko. And I don't know, I like a lot of artists. I like art. I've sold shoes and I've made art, and I recommend art over selling shoes. Nothing wrong with selling shoes, but art's a lot better, a lot more fun. So I got a job teaching 1 year appointment over in Jackson, Tennessee at Union University. Some guy there had got a Danforth fellowship, and he'd gone out to California for a year's leave. And so they were looking for somebody for a year. Well, they hired me for that year. I would love to have gone and stayed. I thought at the time I wanted to stay out because I was desperate. My wife was pregnant by this time. I had gotten married. She was pregnant, and I had no money and no job and no prospects of anything. But they weren't going to keep me home because they couldn't. They didn't have the money, and I'd understood that to start with. So I wound up teaching then at, now keep in mind that I was teaching at a Baptist school. Wound up then going to Athens, Alabama at a Methodist college. I'd never dreamed I'd be teaching any of these kind of places. And when the president of the Methodist college interviewed me for the job, he said, "You don't drink or smoke, do you?" I was dying for a cigarette. I smoked at that time. Lied like a dog. I said, "No, I don't do either one of those two things." Anyway, I stayed there for 8 years, and I had a mixed experience in terms of jobs. I taught art and ran a little art department there, chairman of it. And then I became the dean of students. You talk about somebody ill-prepared for a job. I was a dean of women, I was a dean of men, and the dean of students. And I dealt with every problem. This was a small school, about 1,400 people or something. I dealt with every problem you can name that's ever existed in any school. They had brought in order to keep the school from going broke. When the Depression hit, it upgraded the life of that school. The school went back to the Civil War. It had always been in danger of being closed, but the Depression hit and it actually raised the level of life at the school there. But anyhow, they hit on this scheme of bringing in all of these students who were from very wealthy families from around the country that had screwed up. These kids had emotional problems or had been kicked out or flunked out or whatever. They were spoiled rich kids. Well, the school in its recruiting these kids had lied and told them what a country club this place was, which was not true. Well, they brought those rascals in, men and women, boys and girls, whatever they were. And that was the first shock they saw, that this was not the country club had been promised. And they began to get pretty rowdy. And I spent the few years that I was the dean of students there, I spent I don't know how many hours going out on raids with the local sheriff or the local chief of police. I investigated every crime. I investigated murder. I investigated bombings. I investigated kidnappings. I investigated rapes. I investigated just plain old screwy students. I kicked students out of school. I pleaded with them to stop and behave. I'd go out night after night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd be called out. I'd got hardly any sleep. I'd come in from being out there and go to the studio to paint, and I'd fall asleep in front of the easel trying to paint there. But it was an experience, I'll tell you that. In the meantime, this friend of mine, Warren Dennis, we'd stayed in touch. He was in South Alabama, I was in North Alabama. I was Methodist, he was Baptist. And we stayed in touch, and he got a good job over at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, up in the mountains. Beautiful place. And he called me one day. He said, "Look, we're looking for somebody to hire over here, maybe a chairman or something." I thought, God, I don't want to do any more administrative work, and I sure don't want to deal with anything that deals with problems like being a chairman of our department. Anyhow, he said, "We'll get you to come over and judge this student art competition, give a talk, and we'll pay you expenses, and they won't know that we're really interviewing you for a job here." So I thought, well, that's a good idea. And so my wife and I drove over, and it's way up in the mountains. And this was actually in spring, but she was just terrified of the mountains and the heights and so on like that, and worried about snow and everything. So we got over there, and we were staying with our friends at Dennis's in this house on Faculty Street, a big house belonged to the university. And we were talking about the stuff that had happened that day, and we were sitting in their kitchen drinking coffee. And all of a sudden she jumped up and says, "Get the car, we've got to go." I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "It's snowing out back." And it wasn't snowing, it was in springtime, though they do get snow there sometimes spring. All these apple blossoms had blown off these trees, big wind blowing in this. It just looked like snow falling. All this white was running down the back of these houses here. They laughed about that. But anyhow, we wound up going back, and then they offered me a job, and then they conned me into becoming the art department chairman, which I did for 8 years there. So I'd already done a little bit of that kind of administrative work at Union. I did a lot of it for 8 years at Athens, Alabama, and then I did 10 years at Appalachian State University. It was a great experience. First 2 years we lived in what I said was faculty housing. We had these nice big old houses. For 2 years, for minimal rent, you could live in those. And then by that time, if you were going to stay on, you had to get your own house. And so there were, at that time we went, there were 3 families, us and 2 others. And they were all planning on staying. One guy was in English, one in math, and I was in art. And none of us had any money to buy land or do anything with. So one of these guys knew the mayor of this little town. He was a kind of old-fashioned mountaineer type, foxy guy, and he owned about half the county. And so this guy played bridge with him, and he went and he told him, he said, listen, there are three of us, three families. We're all interested in making our contribution to Boone, to the university. We would love to stay, but we can't stay here. We have no money to buy and build with. He says, I'll sell you a piece of land cheap. You don't have to put a penny down. You just pay it back over a number of years to me. Well, you know, that was just unbelievable. And so we did. We had a little compound up there with three houses with all our kids were about the same ages. And we built this thing up on this mountainside and lived there for 8 years, I guess. And it was as close to paradise as a thing could be. It was ideal. We had great friends. The school, we did a lot of crazy things at the school. We opened a loft in New York City. We got money from the school to go up there and rent this loft, and we'd take students. See, the students, most of the students had never seen art of any kind. And we used school cars and vans, and 2 or 3 faculty would drive them up there. And when we first had this place, this was down in Tribeca. And at that time, Tribeca was just a loser. I mean, it was full of nothing but bums and things falling down in commercial, industrial buildings and stuff like that. And it was eye-opening to the students to see. They went to the museums and got into some artist studios. They had a great time doing all kinds of things, and some stuff we didn't want to know what they were doing, but it was marvelous. And then somebody called me from Penn State, and wound up that I went up there several times and interviewed, and they offered me a gigantic raise, something I just felt like I couldn't turn down. Some people thought it's because I was having some change of life or something at this age, but it was, you know, they offered me at this time, and this is back in '76, they offered me a $10,000 raise, and back then that was pretty big bucks. And I didn't feel like I could pass it up, and it was a sort of a new challenge. And so I went into my wife, who had a business going. She had a interior design business going. I said, pack up, sell the house, we're moving to Pennsylvania. We wound up going, and in some ways the biggest mistake I ever made. I got up there, and I discovered that my predecessor, the chairman of the art department before I went up, had left in the middle of the last year. Then I found out that they had a long history of problems in the art department with the administration, with the deans, with each other. Some of them are nutty. And there was one guy that was going to, and he was very serious about this. He got a lawyer who was going to take this other painting teacher to court because he claimed he'd stolen his paint marks, the way he put his paint down. You know, it's crazy, insane stuff. But it wasn't going to work out for me, and it wasn't going to work out for them. So I resigned after 2 years, 2 miserable years. And then I was down here interviewing for the chairman of the art department here at the University of Memphis, Memphis State then. And my wife called me and she said, listen, these people from Valdosta want an answer from you today about will you take the G's job or not. I said, well, listen, call back and stall them. Tell them something, because I think these people here are going to offer me a job here. We were interested in coming here. Well, my wife was, because her mother lived not too far down the road in Mississippi, and she was not in good health. So, you know, we wound up down here. And it's been great. Memphis was real good to me. University of Memphis was real good to me and treated me well, and I thoroughly enjoyed being there. That's 5 schools, 40 years. All kind of goofy experiences. I used to teach classes. There were 300 in a section. I'd teach 3 sections a semester, 900 students. And it was just wild, but it was also powerful, you know, you had this power over these people. And the challenge was to make them exciting. I had some goofy experiences there. One time I had a section of 300, and the president of the school had slipped into the back of this auditorium. I didn't know he was back there. I did a lot of nutty stuff. I'd run around and jump off the platform and run up and down the aisles and hit him in the head and throw things at him. But he saw me after it was over. I thought, oh God, I'm fixing to get fired here because nobody teaches this way. And he said, you know, I enjoyed the class, but I had problems understanding you sometime and seeing what you show. And he said, what I want you to do is to buy this huge big movie-sized screen, and I want to give you a portable mic, and that way you can run everywhere you want to, but they'll be able to hear you. Now, the problem with the portable mic was that in this town, this was in North Carolina, there was a local radio station that played a lot of hillbilly music. And occasionally, if the weather was bad, you know, a certain kind of way, I'd be hollering and yelling about art, and these students would be looking up there and thinking this guy's crazy. And so out of my mouth would come this country quartet and singing some kind of song. They just crack up laughing, you know. But I thought I'm the world's greatest teacher. Here I've got 300 people and they're not bored and they're going to get excited about art. So one day I was just more rambunctious than usual, running and leaping and whirling and dancing. And the class got with it. They were laughing and applauding and yelling and saying more and more and so on. After class was over, I thought, I am the world's greatest teacher. So I walked up to the student union to get a cup of coffee, went in, and you know these plastic chairs that they put all those kind of places. Got my coffee, sat down in the chair, and I thought, God, somebody spilled some ice here. And I sat right down in it. They've spilled a Coke and some ice. So I got up, wasn't anything in the chair. Sat down again and felt this cold and looked down again. And I reached around and the back of the seat of my pants was totally gone. It ripped completely open. And these sorry students knew I didn't know it. And the more they'd holler, the wilder I'd get. And they'd laugh and carry on. I thought, I'm the world's biggest fool. I'm not the world's greatest teacher. But I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed teaching. Art's always hard for me to do. I don't think I have any natural talent at all, but I've got ideas and I'm willing to work hard at it. So, you know, from picture to picture, I never seem to have learned anything. And if I try to say, oh, that trick worked in that last one, I'll do it again in this one, it never works out. It's like starting anew, which is challenging but exciting. So every time it's a trip to an unknown place of some sort. The way I work is I use a lot of tracing paper, and what I do is I get a piece of tracing paper the same size as the piece of drawing paper that I'm going to be working on. And I then take smaller sheets of smaller pieces of tracing paper, and I begin to work out, because I hate to go back in and mess up the art paper I'm going to be doing the thing on, the drawing paper, with a lot of erasers and changes in there. I'm going to do some of that later on while I'm painting, but I don't want to have to do it with a lot of pencil work and stuff. No. So I work a pretty full-fledged drawing up, and I'll take smaller parts of whatever's in that drawing, and I'll do some drawings on them, and I'll start moving these things around on that big piece of tracing paper until everything seems to be in place. And then I'll transfer all of that onto the drawing paper. Then when I start painting, then I'll find that there are things that I need to take out or change or remove while I'm doing the painting on it itself. So it goes through a number of different stages. I might use photographs, I might use things from magazines, I might use things I saw on TV. The ideas come from observing the human race. And then I'm always looking in these packages back here, those brown packages, they're chock full of, it's like they call it a morgue in a newspaper. It's chock full of images of some sort, photographs or whatever, of all kind of things. You know, I don't know what a moose looks like, so I got a photograph of a moose in there from a hunting magazine. I'm always looking. I go to doctors and dentist offices, and they have all these old magazines. I get them. I see something I like in there, and they're not looking. I'm just sliding these things, tearing them right out of their magazines there. I figure better me than somebody else. I was still painting with oil on canvas, big giant paintings and all. But I began to do some drawing. I'd never done a lot of just direct drawing. I just usually started directly on the canvas and things worked out. But I began to do some large black and white charcoal drawings, huge things with much the same kind of stuff in them. Same kind of subject matter. I did a lot of disembodied heads. It kind of got to be a trademark, you know, and people expected to see that I was going to keep painting disembodied heads forever. But I got tired of doing it all the time. But anyhow, I got kind of excited about working on paper. I kind of like the touch of it and everything. And so I began to add a little bit of watercolor to these black and white things, and they were big. And then I added a little pastel. I'd never worked with pastel before in my life. I always thought it was kind of a sissy medium, or as Arnold Schwarzenegger would say, sissy girl medium or something like that. And it was, you know, once you put it down, it was there. Well, it wasn't, but I taught myself how to use it, and I got to be, frankly bragging, a master of pastel. Not only that, but I discovered you could change it. You could make major changes in it if you knew what you were doing. And then I discovered that this gouache I'd been using in watercolor, I could work it back and forth into the pastel, which is pretty tricky stuff to do. So I had a major shift in the materials that I was using, from the oil on canvas to this mixed thing of sometimes all gouache, sometimes all pastels, sometimes mixes. People have long thought that oil on canvas is the only major kind of painting to do. And if it's watercolor or gouache or pastel or something like that on paper, it can't be taken quite as seriously, which is a bunch of bull. I mean, if it was good enough for Picasso and Matisse to use, it's damn sure good enough for me to use. But that's been a question that's tossed out at me occasionally. I refuse to accept that. But there's a certain kind of richness that you can get, I guess, with oil paint that maybe I can't quite get, but you see the pastel is almost pure pigment. And when you go back in with the pastel into some things there, you're getting stuff as rich as anything you could ever get with oil. But, you know, I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm doing it with the stuff I want to do it with, and I intend to keep on until I can't do it any longer, and then I'll go back to oil on canvas or something else. I don't know. I intend to keep working. That's the only thing I know. I got where I started using animals a lot. I like animals, probably better than human animals, but did a bunch of flamingos, did a bunch of pigs. I got where I could just whip out pigs like crazy, and then I got into flamingos, and I've done all kind of animals. But I have these animals doing things that human beings do, and I put them frequently into human being clothes. And it's something that makes the ridiculous things that the human race does become even more ridiculous when you see these animals dressed like humans doing it. And I like doing them. I like doing it. Oh, like I told you earlier, it's awfully hard on me to do it. The first thing is I have to figure out, I get the ideas. I've got ideas, man, ideas pop in my mind like crazy all the time. The hardest thing for me to do is to start drawing to get ready for that next painting. And my folks just dread to see it when I say, better watch out, I'm having to start a new drawing. Because they know that I get grouchy, I have a difficult time trying to work out all the problems. It's just agony for me. Well, I usually get that done all right, and I get started putting some paint on and some stuff on the paper. And then things begin to go better. Now, they don't always go better right quickly, but they go better generally. And I begin to feel better. I was like, by God, this is going to actually work again. It's going to be like magic to work again. And then as I get closer to the end and I've solved most of the problems, it's just this overwhelming feeling of satisfaction of having completed something that's never been done before in this world. And it feels real good. And then I have to start another damn drawing and I feel so bad. When I was teaching in Jackson, and when I moved to Alabama, I was still doing big abstractions, big, huge abstractions. And there came a time when I couldn't seem to do those anymore. I said, it's just not right for me to do this. And I thought, what'll I do? What'll I do? This is all I know is making art. What'll I do? And I looked around, and here was nature out there, and I'd never paid any attention to nature much, and all of a sudden I realized here's an almost inexhaustible source of all kind of forms and colors and light and everything else. So I did a radical change. I started painting landscapes and scenes with old houses in them and that kind of thing. And it was very rewarding. I did a pretty decent job of it. The funny thing that happened is that there was the first old house I painted in this town in Alabama burned down, and then I painted another place and it burned down. People said, don't paint our houses, we don't want you around our house. But when I went on to Boone, then I was well into this and got up there, and there was a shift, a change I had to make in the art, but it wasn't I was still doing the landscapes. But the light in the mountains was so sharp and so intense because you're up higher and above the pollution level so much as compared to that in Alabama, which is pretty close to sea level. And it's much warmer, and it's a softer light there. The one in the mountains was sharp light. Well, I'd always been interested in light being a part of these things because light kind of conveys an emotion or a mood or something for me. So I had to make a shift to adjust to that, the look of that kind of thing, and did so. And then I painted this stuff for the 8 years I was there, and 2 years I was at Penn State, and came back down here and continued to paint that for the first couple of years I was here. And about 1980, all of a sudden I couldn't finish to do those pictures anymore. And I've been doing those pictures for 20 years or something. Thought I'd be doing them all my life. And the work kind of looked a little bit, if Ed, you know, Edward Hopper's work, it looked a little bit like Edward Hopper's, and that kind of attitude about things. And I painted mountains and snow scenes, and some was pretty loose and almost abstract, but it was still a kind of realism. But I couldn't do those things anymore when I was down here after a couple of years. I didn't know why. I couldn't finish them. I'd done a few. And I tried big and I tried small, and it was a terrifying thing. Now here I've devoted a large part of my life to making art, and I can no longer make art. And so I've told this story so many times. I whined and sniveled for about a year. I'm a great whiner and sniveler. And my wife finally said, I'm damn sick and tired of hearing that whining and sniveling. I said, but don't you realize my life has come to an end? I can't make art anymore. She said, I'll tell you what to do. She always tell me what to do anyhow. I said, what? I was desperate. She said, do like you did back when you were an abstract expressionist. I said, what do you mean? She said, just throw paint. Throw some paint up there on the canvas. I thought, my God, I'm desperate. I'll do it. And I began to throw some paint up on some canvas, and this is like writer's block. You find some way to get loose from it. Well, this was painter's block, and by doing that, I did some big, huge abstractions, and all of a sudden I was freed up. All those years that I had painted those landscapes, years and years, there were only 2 pictures I did that had people in them. Only 2 pictures I did. And I finally figured out what I was up to with all those pictures. I decided I didn't like the human race. I didn't like people generally, not individuals, but people generally. I didn't like the world. I didn't like the job I had. There were all kinds of things I didn't like about things. And the human race doesn't have a great history anyhow. I painted those pictures as a means of escaping from all the ugliness I saw around, because people were not allowed to enter these pictures. Now, there were a lot of houses in them and stuff like that. And it had been made by human beings, but human beings were not allowed to come into them, and it provided an escape for me so I could retain my sanity maybe from all this stuff that was going on around me. Well, when I could no longer paint those things, and I started throwing that paint up, I realized what had happened is this world that I'd kept at distance for those pictures had pushed in on me, and I couldn't avoid the world and people anymore. And out of that came some of the wildest, meanest, rawest, crudest work that anybody's ever done in their life. I was like a man of fire. I had nothing to say about what was happening. It simply happened. And I had these huge canvases, and I was slapping these things up, and they began to emerge from that slap, throwing the paint up, they began to emerge into images of things. Some things are parts of anatomy, penises and amputated hands and stuff like this and all. And it just got wilder and wilder and wilder. And I didn't care. I didn't care. I was breaking every rule ever made. And I knew that there was nothing I could do with this stuff, you know. Nobody would ever want this stuff. And it began to evolve a little from 1980 on. It has continued to evolve, but it still has had work that's bothered people a lot. And some of it was pretty raw and pretty raunchy. And I had a bunch of old ladies one time. I did a show. I just did this to accommodate a friend. There was a woman over at Theater Memphis. They had a little art gallery over there at the time, and this woman was paid by the art gallery people, the Theater Memphis people, to arrange shows. Well, she came and talked to me, and she was a friend. I knew her. She came and talked to me, and at that time I was doing those houses and landscapes. She said, about 2 years from now, we'd like to do a show of your art. I said, well, I didn't want to do it, but I said, you're a friend, I'll do it. Well, in the meantime, this had all happened, and this stuff was really raw. Well, she called me one day. She says, we need to set a specific date and so on. This is 2 years later. And I said, well, you know, so-and-so, I don't think you want to show this work. I said, it seems to upset a lot of people. And she says, I'll come see it. So she came to my studio over at school, and she looked at it, and she said, we'll do it. I said, you're going to be in big trouble. She said, I don't care, we'll do it. So I put the show up over there, and they had a murder mystery on. I can't remember whether it was Dialed In for Murder or something on that night. Big crowd there, and so we got the show up. These people didn't see this show. They went on in and didn't see the show. Well, at intermission, they all came down this little bar down there to get a glass of wine or whatever. And here's this stuff staring them in the face along a hall and down in this exhibition area. And my God, these people exploded. They said, "This is pornographic. This is terrible. Get this stuff out of here." Well, I mean, I've never seen people get so upset about art in my life. I've seen a lot of people get upset about art, but this was a mob of upset people. So after it was over, the board of directors called her in the next day or something, and said, we want you to censor that show and take it down. She said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to censor the show. And bless her little pointed head, she didn't, and it stayed up. But boy, it made people mad. There were a bunch of old women from a certain church's Sunday school. I mean, these are old women, older than me. And they were going to march on it and rip it off the walls. And I kept telling people, I said, they never did it because they couldn't get their walkers going fast enough to get it ripped off the walls there. A lot of people don't buy my art. It's a price I pay. But I guess they'd find some of it hard to live with. You know, people, some of them aren't looking for anything more than something that matches a couch and the wall maybe, but I sell a few things along. The only gallery in town that's ever done any good for me has been Jay Atkin. And Jay's the only person had nerve and courage enough, I guess, and he didn't make much money off of it, but at least I've shown several times with him. But I sold a piece to the Art Center over in Little Rock. It's a marvelous museum over there. Years ago, they realized they didn't have enough money to compete with the big boys when they started the museum, so they decided to specialize in works on paper. And works on paper at that time were pretty cheap, whether it's prints or original drawings or paintings on paper or whatever. So they specialized in that, and now those kind of things cost a lot, but they've got one of the world's greatest collections of artwork on paper from the Renaissance down to the present. It's a marvelous place, and the guy that did all of that is retired recently, but Townsend Wolf did a great job with that. Well, I did a one-man show over there, which was kind of courageous for them too. But they bought a piece of mine, huge piece, about 6, 7 feet long. And at that time I was doing a series on people in asylums and about bad dreams, about dreams they have. You know, even crazy people dream. And this is a huge thing with these crazed giant heads pushed up against this mesh and screaming. I mean, it's a beautiful piece, but it's a mean, ugly devil. And they bought it, and which I thought was pretty courageous on their part. Well, they told me later this funny thing happened. They go through, they buy this stuff, and their board of directors or whatever they are, it's kind of a rubber stamp outfit. And I guess Townsend had always just done whatever he wanted. And so they were showing these people the acquisitions they had made and to get their rubber stamp approval. And one guy said, "What the hell do you mean we're paying our hard-earned money for that damn ugly thing there?" And the director turned to the curator, and he said, "So-and-so will now explain to you why this is a great work of art." Well, the guy had been told it was going to happen. All he swallowed about 3 times before he did it. But sometimes I've been over there and they've had it up, and I'll sneak up behind people looking at it, and they all say, "That's a damn ugly thing there." I like it when people react. I don't care how they react. I like for them to react to me. I don't want it to just be something pretty on a wall. And I did a show at the university when all this kind of stuff was going on, and I had a thing on rape, men abusing women and raping women and stuff like that. These were gigantic things, and big things on paper. And I was walking along, kind of looking at the show, and this woman was there with a little kid about this size. I like little kids and truck drivers, all people that like my art, you know. But anyhow, this little kid stopped in front of this thing. He turns to my face, he says, "Mama, I'm scared." And I thought, right on, kid, that's what you're supposed to be. But I've had several real moving experiences in terms of the art. I had another piece that dealt with wife abuse. This man just beating the hell out of this woman. And I had it on an easel. This is when I had a studio at school. I had it on the easel working on it, about finished. A knock came on the door, and I said, "Come in," and this woman I know came in. She had one of her little daughters, a little kid about this size, with her. And she had come to ask me about something, wanted some information about something. And the little kid's standing there looking around like this, you know. And the woman's talking and asking, and I'm trying to ask her a question. And the little kid reaches over and tugs at her mother's dress. And she says, "Mama." She says, "Be quiet, we're talking." She said, "But Mama, that looks just like you and Daddy." And the woman fled the room. I thought, right on, that's what art's supposed to be about. The little kid knew what it was about. I like it when it speaks to people. Whatever. Anyhow, the work's gotten a little sweeter and nicer, I guess. It's easy to get on a bandwagon. It's easy to do something that's been accepted as art. You can almost put yourself in this situation. What in the world did those people think? Not just the middle class, but the artist of the time when they looked at their first Van Gogh. This is not art. This breaks every rule. And, you know, rules are great up to a point, and then rules don't have any meaning at all. And I always think about that about Van Gogh. Here's a man that was honest about what he was doing, and yet nobody could accept it. He sold one lousy painting his whole life for a few dollars. But nobody could accept his art at that time, and now look, he's beloved. And same thing true, say, with the Impressionists and all. And you know, you can go down the line, especially in the 19th, 20th century, about honesty in art and being true to yourself and taking chances on being true to yourself. It's easy to paint what's in. Real easy to do that. But I'm convinced that really first-rate art comes out of you being true to yourself. It's whatever it is, it's in you, and it's got to be original that way because there's no other you. And if you're true to whatever it is, once you get old enough to understand yourself, see, a lot of people, young punks, they don't have any business showing any art. They're not anything yet. They don't know who they are, you know. But once you discover who you are, what you are, the art then comes out of whatever it is that makes you unique. And the art's going to be unique that way. It doesn't have to be weird, doesn't have to be strange or anything, but it's going to be yours. May not be any good, may be great, who knows. But that's what honesty is about. And a total commitment to that and that only. And God knows, I know I've paid the price for it there because people don't know what to make of my art, basically. They're not even sure it's art. I'm not sure it's art, maybe, I don't know. But I do it because it's what I have to do. So one of these days, maybe a whole bunch of people say, my God, that was art. We didn't know at the time, but that's art. Who knows?